Welcome, once again, to Pandora's Box. Oh! Who knows the mysteries of Stonehenge? The ancient druids. How did they get the rocks to Wiltshire? Eh? Jake might have an interesting perspective on that, actually. So welcome once again to Pandora's Box, everyone. Thanks for being here with us this evening. If you're listening to us on La Radio, remember that we have a YouTube and a Spotify channel and that. We'd appreciate it if you went onto Spotify and the tubes and give us a subscribe. And also, it's better to watch us on YouTube because then you can be here with us and take in our visages. Mm-hmm. So it's just a bit more immersive, isn't it? And we bring up clips and stuff like that and pictures as we're talking about stuff. So I do think that's the best way to watch us on YouTube. But we have a guest in the studio this evening. Not your first time on AW Radio, but your first time on Pandora's Box. We have Mr. Jacob Ayerst.
Yo.
How's it going, Jake?
Yeah, not too bad. I got a bit of the old hay fever for the first time today.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, so I'm probably sounding a bit croakier than normal. Hopefully that comes off of sexiness.
Yeah, I was going to say, it just makes you sound like, after you've had like a couple of whiskies and like smoked a cigar. And a bit mysterious.
Sound a bit, a bit Phil Anselmo, a bit Willie Nelson. Who's got a croaky whiskey voice?
I remember hearing that, talking, because you were talking to me about Queens of the Stone Age earlier on and your hatred of them.
Yeah.
But Nick Oliveri, the bassist, who was like bold and he had a goatee. Can you picture him in your head?
I mean, like I said, once Brodie Dale left Tim Armstrong, I wanted nothing to do with Queens of the Stone Age. Fair play.
But anyway, the bassist, because he was like the main backing vocalist, he would deliberately drink a lot of whiskey before they would play and like deliberately smoke cigarettes so that he'd have that croaky, almost like to his vocals. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like normally your vocals would be like but then you have like some whiskey and cigarettes and suddenly it's like
what an excuse to drink whiskey and smoke cigarettes.
Yeah.
Straight up before the show. But loosen you up a bit as well.
That's a cool technique as well, because I know Randy Blythe. Is it Blythe or Blythe? Randy. Yeah. His producer made him just do a run round the block before recording his vocals.
Really?
He should have heard the whiskey technique.
Yeah, that'd have been a lot more fun.
Yeah, man.
Method singing.
Yeah. But it's also reminds me of Phoebe Buffay in Friends.
Yeah.
Do you remember that episode?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
She gets a cold and she sings all these like blues songs and stuff in the cafe, and then her cold goes and she gets really angry about it because she felt like it was like the best she ever played. So she's like running around. I can't remember, somebody else gets
like
a cold
and floors and stuff.
Yeah, and she's like rubbing like somebody's like dirty tissue on her face. And, like she knows she's got a cold and everything. Like I remember she's like sang like a weird song about like a sticky shoe. She's like, my sticky shoe, why you stick on me, baby.
I feel like that's a bit of a 90s thing, though, isn't it? There's a lot of weird vocal styles in the 90s.
Yeah.
Obviously the Yarlin, but then like is it Free Non-Blondes? You know that song? And I say, what's going on?
Oh yeah. What's going on?
Yeah. What happened to that vocal? So nobody really does sort of weird vocals anymore, I think.
Yeah, I know. One thing I thought was really cool, actually, just like going off on one without that, is have you guys heard that since Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill was played on the latest season of Stranger Things, did you know that Kate Bush is number one now?
All I know is that I saw Justin Hawkins did a YouTube video about Kate Bush, so I assume that she's like pertinent at the moment, but I didn't know why.
Well, she's number one in the UK charts.
Oh, right.
Wow.
And it's also made her, I think, the oldest female musician ever to hit number one, which is a cool accolade in itself. 63. Apparently before, that title was held by Cher, who was 59 when Do You Believe Love hit number one back in 1999. So she's knocked Cher off her pedestal. Cher must be like 150 now or something. But anyway, that's a different subject. But do you know what? She's one of those people you see pictures of her in like 1960, and she's like looks the same as she does now. I'm like, man, there's something weird going on there. She's like
her and Madonna.
She's like having baths of like virgin blood or something. like there was actually like some weird. Did you ever hear? There was like some weird like Hungarian queen that used to do that.
Countess Bathory.
Was that it?
Yeah.
I love how instantly you knew her name. And like, yeah, she's like one of the darkest rulers of her time. Was it like Hungary or something like that? It was one of those countries, wasn't it?
Countries, yeah.
It was one of those countries.
Yeah, I know it was Eastern Europe. I think it was
that's
somewhere,
what I meant.
Yeah.
No, obviously offence mended. So.
Yeah. So somewhere around what would be Carpathia, because I know that Bram Stoker took a little bit of inspiration both from her and from Vlad the Impaler. But she was, I don't know if she was before or after him, but she used to bathe in the blood of like local peasant virgins
women,
because she thought it kept her young. Yeah, she was.
What a creepy woman, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, she literally used to just like kill local virgin women and then just like fill up baths, and because she thought it would make her immortal.
Oh my god!
That's dark,
drinking the blood of babies.
That's cool. I thought you might know about that.
Elizabeth Bathory.
Oh, that's a cool name. I wonder if that's why the band or the guy like Bathory.
Yeah, definitely. On their first album, there's a song called. What is it? I think it might just be called Bathory. I can't remember, but it's about her. It's about all lyrics about bathing in blood.
Oh, that's awesome. Man.
It's also what I named one of my hamsters a couple of years ago. Yeah, Elizabeth Bathory and Marie Laveau. Yeah,
who's Marie Laveau then?
Like a voodoo woman.
Oh, was she?
Yeah, she was
like New Orleans.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, like a woman from New Orleans who practiced voodoo. I didn't know much about her, but I just wanted to give them non-hamstery names.
Yeah, I like the fact that they were just like the two most like menacing hamsters.
Well, actually, I think Elizabeth Bathory, the hamster that is, was really bitey. We couldn't even handle her because she so
she was trying to make you guys bleed.
Yeah,
that was it. She was bathing our blood.
Yeah, man.
But she's gone now, so it didn't work. Didn't work.
Getting all the way back to my original point there. Yeah, so like running up that hill has become number one. And I think all I was going to say is that like, because Kate Bush is a very quirky woman, isn't she? Because you were saying about how like there's not that many like quirky vocals and stuff nowadays. I was listening to, I'm not sure if you guys noticed, I was listening to Kate Bush in the car. That's what we were listening to.
I wondered what it was.
Yeah, I was just like, because like my mum used to play it all the time when I was a little kid. Would like have it on vinyl and stuff, and I've always like really liked it, but I've never like sort of. It's not the sort of thing I like it, but it's not the sort of thing I'd like put on myself.
It's a passing listen in the background sometimes.
But I've really enjoyed actually like listening to it myself recently, and I actually like really respect someone like Kate Bush. Do you know what I mean? Like she's one of those people that is like there's nobody else like Kate Bush, to be fair to her.
I heard that since, because she like did all the production and everything and owns like all the rights to the song, since it like obviously got the huge boost from being on Stranger Things, she's been making like 250 grand a week just from royalties from the song.
That's so cool.
I saw that she released like a statement just basically saying like she like never believed in a million years when she like agreed to have the song on the thing that like it would mean that her like running up that hill would go to number one again, and she just like set the like a thought it was real. Like, she always comes across as like a real nice lady. I think like proper sincere, down to earth. Like she just basically said like a massive thank you to like the creators of the show just for like even asking her for the song and to like like because it's like made it. It's made all like the younger generation like aware of the track. Do you know what I mean? And it does make me laugh in a way though, because I can't help but think a little bit. Maybe it's like the cynical part of me that makes me almost think that like, I bet because Stranger Things are so trendy, it's almost like I could imagine like a 21-year-old nowadays would be like, oh yes, because it's on Stranger Things, that's great. But if like they heard like their mum or dad listening to it, they'd probably be like, that's sad. You know what I mean?
I love all the fashion as well in Stranger Things. Like I can totally see all that coming back. Like the proper bright. Like
I think it's already started happening.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the shirt you're wearing, dude. Yeah, that's like proper 80s, isn't it?
That's straight out of the 80s. That's actually from a vintage shop. Yeah, like from my favourite shirt as well.
And I think like mullets and stuff are coming back, aren't they? And like 80s sort of shaped
It just
glasses.
does look so cool. I remember even in the third season, because I've just been watching them all like recently, and I think the main character, the Elle, she started wearing all these funky colours and that in that season. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. People should like wear that more anyway.
Do you have you watched Stranger Things? Or
I've not watched the newest season. I got well into the last ones. But I'm hoping for no spoilers.
New one's freaky. Oh no, season 4 though, no spoilers. But like I watched with Meg, I watched season 3, but we just started watching season 4, and she's like, I can't watch this.
Really?
Literally, it's that scary for her that she can't watch it. But I remember you were saying that it was like more like, and it is. It's pretty freaky. Like
the way I describe it is
concepts of it and stuff.
Yeah. It's the one that I would consider is like it's always obviously had horror elements, but I'd say this is the season that's most like pure like horror.
But it's like cool. As well, like the characters are like growing up a bit. They're getting into like teenage like kind of things as well. So it's almost like the content's growing up a little bit as well, like with the
themes.
I think it after the first few episodes, you get used to it, and it's a bit more more chill. But those first few episodes of season 4, you're like, fuck, this is dark.
There's been quite a few things in the wake of Stranger Things that it's that same sort of 80s nostalgia, but pushing it more into a horror zone. I know there was Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, wasn't there, a few years ago. That was real good.
Oh, I've not seen that.
What's that?
It was real cool.
Sounds like you'd love that, man.
It
was a series of books in the 80s that sort of preceded like Goosebumps.
Right.
But it was meant to be real scary. It was a little bit before our time, I think. Obviously Goosebumps was more us. But they made a film version of it a couple of years ago, and it's worth checking out. Again, it's like is it set in the 70s or 80s? Anyway, it's nostalgic. That's what really matters.
I saw the monsters and stuff from it, and some of them did look pretty creepy.
It was pretty spooky.
Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Yeah, it definitely sort of straddled that sort of fantasy horror line, the same as like Stranger Things does, but it was a bit more on the horror side. And then there was Fear Street, came out last summer, was it?
Yeah.
Did you watch any of those?
No.
I haven't seen it, but I remember seeing it.
Yeah, so that's it's a series of 3 films on Netflix that all follow on after each other. But that Fear Street was the more adult, where it was the teen book series written by R.L. Stein. Right. So it was a bit more horror-y. And that series, some proper like shock horror gore, proper creepy moments.
That sounds amazing.
But again, like similarly, one of the things that people were talking about when Fear Street came out was the soundtrack, because what they did, there was one set in I think the first one was set in the early 90s, the second one went back to before that and it was set in the 70s, and then the third one was set between like the 1600s and now. But what they did with the first 2 films was sort of told the story or like set the atmosphere through contemporary music. So you've got like Nirvana and stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
But like similarly to what you were saying, a lot of people that were talking about it when it came out were saying like, this is all new music essentially to the Zoomers that are watching it.
Yeah, man, 100%.
Were the films actually any good? Because I remember when they came out and I was thinking to myself, I need to watch them, and then I just never got round to it.
I loved them, but I like that sort of I love that sort of 80s high school horror sort of thing. I like the atmosphere of it. Do you know what I mean? I think being from the 90s, that was obviously in vogue for.
Oh man, growing up watching like Nightmare on Elm Street, and Friday the 13th, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, Scream and It was obviously not that. I think both of us were probably too young to be watching those in the 90s. I know I definitely was, but.
I mean, as you can probably remember. So just to give everyone a bit of background. So for people that don't know, so Jake is Bullwinkle's older brother, and so obviously Zeus the Gold's brother as well. So as I've said before, like Josh is like one of my very oldest friends who I grew up with. Literally met Josh when I was like 4 or 5, and me and Josh hit it off straight away. So when I started going around Josh's, your mum's house, I literally remember that you were still in nappies, because obviously you're 4 years younger than me and Josh.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I was until quite recently.
I was going to say that was just a couple of years ago. Me and you were friends. Yeah. But as you can probably remember from when we were really little, me and Josh used to go to what's known as Westkey Records. Was it's like a music shop in town, but it also used to sell secondhand VHS.
Pretty much right. 100 meters from where we're standing?
Yeah, literally just down the road. And the guy there used to. He didn't really mind selling us horror movies, even though we were obviously they were 15s and 18s, but we would just buy them. Yeah. For it was 4 or 5 quid. So me and Josh would sort of put our pocket money together, and we'd so 1 week we'd say buy Silence of the Lambs. The next week we'd buy Nightmare on Elm Street. The next week we'd buy Halloween. All the classics, all those classic 80s horrors. And me and Josh would watch them. And I do remember I do think there's something to say to conditioning yourself, because nowadays there's not anything really that I would find psychologically disturbing that I could watch on television. Do you know what I mean? I do have a couple, I guess, of what you would say irrational fears, or maybe not so irrational. I got a bit a phobia of great white sharks, but I wouldn't ever watch a movie and be oh, this is too much for me, I need to turn it off.
Yeah.
So I think there's something to be said for that. But I can remember at the time when I was a little kid watching some of them and being freaked out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the film that scared me most in my whole life was not Evil Dead 2, although that's a banger. Scary Movie 2.
Really?
Yeah, you wouldn't think so, but
I mean, you wouldn't.
When I first watched that, Josh...
Scary movie? It's a comedy?
Yeah, but when you rewatch it now, the bits with Reagan are pretty much almost, except for the fact they, put some funny lines in, visually it's kind of exactly the same as The Exorcist. So when I watched it when I was 6,
oh yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, that proper terrified me. It didn't help that I had Josh there telling me that demons exist and they're going to come into the house at night and stuff like that.
That's so Josh, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
and then I'd get night terrors from it, and then at the height of my night terrors he'd dress up as a ghost and stand in the corner of my room in the dark and stuff
That's
like that.
like one of the most notorious stories of like yours and Josh's relationship.
Yeah,
I remember I was like, for the first time in ages, because it came into my head like a few months ago, and I hadn't obviously thought about that tale in years. Because I remember Josh coming into school literally like the next day or whatever, and being like, man, I am in so much trouble. And because like proper like, obviously your mum was like so angry with him, because you were like proper affected by that, weren't you?
Well, like I say, I was having night terrors at the time, mainly because Josh used to he'd come into my room at night with his videos from Adrian's Records, whatever it was called. I remember him waking me up to make me watch the murder scene at the beginning of Scream, you know, where she gets like stabbed in the chest, and then he just like turned it off and was like, right, night. I still don't know what the point in that was.
I think Josh is always just like, one of the things that's always amused Josh most is like other people's suffering. Yeah. which is funny, because this is going to sound like a complete like counter statement, but he's like one of the nicest guys I've ever known.
They're the ones you got to watch.
Yeah. But like at the same time, if I think back to it, like all growing up, it was almost like if ever we were like play fighting or sort of like playing Dirty Sanchez, as we call it. So like, you know, Dirty Sanchez, that old television program where like the Welsh guys always used to just do like horrible stunts on each other. So we do a lot of stuff like that when we were like in school. But like when I think back on it, Josh somehow would like maneuver himself, so he was never really the one doing it, but he was the one that was laughing the most when other people were like in pain or were like, you know what I mean?
Well, he'd always set me up to do things like that. I mean, one of the things I think we were talking about the other day, where like he'd try and just make me do cheeky stuff as a kid. So like he like, I think we were in a restaurant in Spain, and he told me to go up and ask the waiter for £1. And I did it just thinking like, oh yeah, why wouldn't I? I'm 4 or whatever. Yeah. So I went up to this waiter and asked him for £1 or a, what would it have been then?
€1.
Yeah, whatever. And then he got it out. And
a potato.
A potato. Yeah, and then he got one out of his pocket and gave it to me. And then I came and sat down with my coin. So Josh started crying. I think that was how it ended. But he was upset that he was trying to make me look stupid.
Oh, and it worked.
And I'd got the £1. Yeah.
And then you got the potato.
Yeah. Or I think similarly, there was one where we were camping at like a Butlins or something, and he dared me to go up and sing a Linkin Park song on the stage. What we'd do at the time in the privacy of home was he'd do Mike Shinoda's parts and I'd do Chester Bennington's parts.
Sometimes I think he'd switch.
Yeah.
Because he used to do it with me as well, but we'd like switch.
Yeah.
But it would be usually depending on what Josh wanted to do at the time.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And I think like he told me to go up and do it, but then when I got up there, because I was quite happy to do it, I said, oh, my brother needs to come up as well. So then like a spotlight went on him. And then everybody was waiting for him to come up and join. He was just sat at the table like, oh, fuck. I mean, not that.
I mean, fudge.
Drats.
Drats. Yeah. So both me and you have slipped up today, man.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So did he go up? Did Josh go up?
No, I had to do both parts, I think.
Right.
I got
pushing your vocals.
Applause.
Yeah. But I bet your lungs were burning by the end, you know, trying to hold like a Chester Bennington note and then having to straight away go into a rap. Afterwards you're like... No wonder Meatloaf used to sweat so much on stage. You know what I mean? Well, you realise, don't you, at the time when you're there performing. Quite cool though. That was like, you know, you had like a little performance, a one-man performance.
Yeah.
Can you remember what song it was you did?
I wouldn't remember. I know that we used to have to do Queen a lot because Josh wanted to be Freddie Mercury, and obviously in that context, because he wanted to be in the foreground, so I was relegated to being Roger Taylor, the drummer. Yeah. So you
were just standing there like going.
Well, yeah. Usually at home, I think I'd have a tray, like a, you know, what you eat your dinner on, full of water, and because I think there was a Queen music video where his drums had rain on them, so when he hit it, like water splashed up. So I know that was Josh's like prop that I had to have in the background. But we actually did it as one of the Carnival concerts one year, us and Luke Palmer, I think.
Yeah, that rings a bell. Yeah. I think I couldn't make it for some reason.
Yeah, that was it. You were supposed to be Brian May, I think.
Yeah, and then for some reason I couldn't make it. I can't remember if it was like, it turned out I was like going on holiday or something, but I couldn't make it.
Yeah, because actually I can remember driving to your nan's house maybe, and you weren't there or something.
Yeah.
I might have made that up in my head, but yeah, it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, horror films.
Yeah, get back to horror films. Yeah, but no, that's what I was going to say. Like, I think there's something to be said for like conditioning yourself at an early age. I think you know, if like some people you can tell. I think we could probably all think of examples of this, that maybe their parents like sheltered them a bit too much, and now you can see even as like fully grown adults that you can tell that like they're quite easily affected. Whereas, like, as I said, I'm not really, like, there's nothing really that bothers...
Desensitized.
Yeah, there's nothing really that bothers me. Do you know what I mean? I'm not really, like... But as I said, I can remember, like, I don't know why this one sticks out the most, like, in particular. But I remember watching Silence of the Lambs for the first time in North Street, around your mum's house. And I remember where I was like staying over, I was just sleeping next to Josh's bed. And I remember when we obviously went to bed in the evening, I remember finding something like really menacing about the fact that obviously I was sleeping next to Josh's bed and there was like nothing under Josh's bed. And almost like peering in the darkness. And there was like just about enough light in the room that I could sort of like obviously like make out the bed and like a couple of things in the room. But obviously under Josh's bed it was just like pitch black. And I just kept imagining suddenly, what's the main like antagonist of Silence of the Lambs, because it's not actually Hannibal Lecter, is it? It's what's his name? He's like the cross-dressing.
The lotion on the skin.
Yeah, put the lotion on the skin. Oh yeah, yeah.
Or else it gets the hose again.
Yeah, or else it gets the hose again, and then he's just getting increasingly more angry. It's like she's like, please. Yeah, I can't remember his name, but Buffalo Bill.
Yeah, is that it? That sounds right.
Yeah, I think it is Buffalo Bill. Not to be confused with the cowboy, the Wild West outlaw. But yeah, I remember.
You imagined him under the bed?
I imagined him suddenly.
That's horrible.
Can you imagine like me peering under it, and then suddenly I imagined that I'd suddenly just see like his like hand and his face would just like and almost like drag me under Josh's bed.
Yeah.
And you know how obviously when you're little, you don't have like your thought processes don't really make sense, do they? But I almost like imagined that like if he like pulled me under Josh's bed, I'd almost like never be seen again. Like almost like there was like some void under Josh's bed, and once I was pulled in, I'd just like disappear. But like and I remember I was just proper like looking next to me, like under like just the darkness under Josh's bed, and just being like, "Oh my god!" And it just took me for like hours to get to sleep, and I was just proper like sweating.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, that was a creepy house anyway. I don't know if you remember, but it was. I mean, everyone who lived in that house was pretty sure that it was haunted in retrospect.
The amount of stories that I've heard about this house.
Yeah, well, even from Kev, you know, your dad, and my stepdad, like. Who's, I would imagine, quite a sceptical person otherwise, but he's convinced that he saw someone walking across the corridor one night when no one was there.
Do you know what? It's so funny because I haven't thought about it in years, but now you said it does bring back memories of like Josh saying stuff. So like, can you guys think of any other sort of like stories or anything?
Yeah, well, Josh has always got that story, doesn't he, where he was in the bathroom.
Was it something to do with the light bulb?
The light bulb like shattered
in the landing.
So it was the light in the bathroom, but it was one of those old school, more like what you'd expect to see in an office or something, maybe I suppose, like a sort of circular light which was screwed in around the sides, and it was all fully screwed in. I don't know if Josh was in the bathroom. I think we heard a smash in the night and got up, and the bathroom, it was just on the floor somehow. It was unscrewed. But the thing I always think, and there's a few things there like that. There's a similar one where like we came down in the morning and the taps were on, and the cactus that was usually somewhere else in the kitchen was in the sink, like weird things like that. But the strange thing that I always think is like, why would a ghost want to do that? Like,
I really want to water this cactus. I mean, I know that cactus can go a long time without water, but this is ridiculous.
Yeah, or just being mischievous in like the most puerile way possible. Like,
Well, yeah.
I always found it quite creepy that Mum always says that she like felt a presence as well, but she felt the presence as like a calming one. And like inviting one, but everyone else felt it as a bit like creepy and off-putting.
Well, I mean, there's many ways that you could sort of like rationalise that. I say rationalise as much as you can rationalise the idea of like a ghost.
Yeah,
but
ghost liked women.
Yeah, like, do you know what I mean? I was going to say, you could say something like maybe it was like a protective mother figure that didn't like men because like their daughter was like abused, or I don't know, it could be anything, or like a protective father that didn't
law
like
for the ghost.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, let's face it, everyone else in the house would have been a man, apart from when like your nan was around.
Apart from Dixie.
Oh yeah, apart from Dixie, the cat.
That is for anyone who thinks that's like a racist person or something.
Yeah. But, rest in peace, Dixie.
Yeah, R.I.P. But I mean, it did start off with sort of almost lore. Like, there was a setup when they first moved in, because I know my mum or dad, I can't remember which one, have told me that when they first went to Ken's corner shop over the road, he told them like, "Oh yeah, that there house is haunted."
I love it. He had to speak like that. Oh, wait, Ken's corner shop.
Ken's corner shop.
That does sound something from like a horror movie straight away, like such like a stereotypical horror movie. Like your mum goes in like after dark and winter, and there's like this guy, like the lights like flickering.
You don't live in that. You ain't moved into number 27.
Was it number 27?
Yeah, 27 North Street.
Yeah.
That there house is haunted.
I remember meeting a kid in Wemden Park and telling him that my house was haunted, and he told me that he'd heard that house was haunted, and that he knew that a ghostly carriage used to ride through the houses in North Street. So
whoa,
where he got that from, I don't know.
That's quite like good knowledge for a little kid in a park. Well, I tell you, my good man, I have you know that my knowledge of Bridgwater history tells you, just bubbles, just like Well, a ghostly carriage used to ride through North Street every day at 12 p.m. That reminds me a little bit about, I read out a ghost story called The Phantom Coach the other week. I've got like a new sort of like horror story show on AW Radio that plays every Saturday night at 10 p.m. plug. And but yeah, my favourite story that I've read out so far is a horror story called The Phantom Coach by a woman called Amelia. Drew, it's literally right there, so it might say at the top. It's like, see, just that literally that big. Amelia, what was her name? Amelia. She was a Victorian. Does it not say the name of the person? No. Oh no, don't worry about it. I know her name was Amelia something. She was a Victorian horror writer that was held in like a lot of in very high regard. But yeah, it just reminded me of that anyway. It's a really cool like ending to that, and there's like as you can probably imagine from the name, it doesn't leave much to the imagination. Yeah. But it's like really creepy anyway. But yeah, it made me think of that.
Yeah. I guess like I don't know. There's a lot of sort of like, especially in sort of like Gothic horror from like the 1800s, you get like a lot of archetypes. Like Dracula's a lot like this, where there's a bit of technology that's relatively sort of pertinent at the time or new, so it becomes like a haunted thing. Like I guess like a carriage is like a common bit of technology. I suppose nowadays you get stories about like ghostly cars, don't you?
Or like like look, I think have you guys ever had this? Like if you're in the right mood and it's like late at night and on your road, maybe you've just watched a horror movie around a friend's house or something like that, and then like you're driving home in the dark, and then you've got almost like that weird fear of like looking in the rear view and seeing somebody like sat behind you, somebody or something. We
were driving back we went for a walk out. Where did we go? We went up on Burrow Mump to see like the Strawberry Moon or whatever it was called. Yeah, that's when we were driving back, Abby was like, "Did you see that hitchhiker?" And I was like, "No, there was no one there." And she was like, "There was just a guy stood by the road like hitchhiking." And I was like, "No." Anyway, she was getting a bit freaked out, like, I'm going to have to go back and look. And then I said to her, like, there's somebody in the back seat. I creeped her right out. But yeah, I know what you mean. I always think that, like, especially when you've got, like, an empty back seat, it's dark, like...
There's just something real startling, like, you just imagine, like... Obviously, it would never happen, touch wood. But, like, you just imagine, like, how freaky it would be if you were just casually driving along at night and then you just, like, casually looked in the rear view and then it was just, like, somebody was just there, like... staring like that. That would be horrible, wouldn't it?
I felt it the other day as well. It was weird. I was driving along and it was like real late at night somewhere in Devon. Right. And you know where you're just Devon. One night in Devon, the Exmoor beast. Yeah. And when you're just out in the middle of nowhere and it's completely like pitch black and dark and everything,
desolation.
And like you're driving, so you're used to that thing of driving and seeing out and just kind of like. But I was thinking, God, like this is so. Like, we're out in the middle of nowhere right now. If like all of a sudden my car didn't work or something, and you're just like stuck out there and it's all misty and that. I was like, you feel safe because you're in your car and that's almost like your travelling space, you're travelling home. But if it all of a sudden could just not be. If it stopped working, then you'd just be like so desolate out there, you know.
I can't remember where I heard this, so it might be rubbish. But I think I remember hearing that like Dartmoor used to be associated with like a lot of like devil worship and demonic activity. Have you ever heard of anything like that?
So I'm not sure, but I know that Dartmoor there are like ancient pagan places. There's a place called is it Grimsdyke or something like that?
Grimspound.
Is that it?
Grimspound.
Grim being like a cognate for Odin or like a name for Odin.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So Grimspound, it's called. Yeah.
Right. And it's like it's out in the middle of nowhere, and it's just like a sort of is it stones or something? I've never actually been there. I've just read about it.
Some sort of ancient stones.
Yeah.
But I don't know loads about it either. But I know it's called Grimspound.
Yeah.
That's why Damh The Bards got that song. There's a Damh The Bards song called Grimspound that he's written about it. Devon's one of his favourite places, and he written about that ancient monument. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I'll have to check that out then.
Yeah,
I know. Someone that I used to work with sent me an article the other day. He'd found something about old sort of folkloric tales around Somerset and Devon of like sightings of the Wild Hunt as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
What's that?
The Wild Hunt, it changes depending on where the story's being told, but like the sort of Germanic version of it is Odin.
It's associated with like Christmas time, isn't it?
Yeah, like a
Christmas.
Yule type thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know much more about it. What I do know is that Jacob Grimm, the sort of 19th century German folklorist.
It sounds like a punk name for you.
Jacob Grimm. I'm going to adopt that.
Yeah.
He made a lot more out of it than was actually there, I think. A lot of Victorian folklorists did. They kind of found something. I mean, this is at the time where Germany wasn't a country yet. They were trying to bring together all these separate sort of states and make like a cohesive thing. Yeah, so like folklorists like Jacob Grimm were trying to mythologize Germany, and like I think one of the things that he picked up on was this idea of the wild hunt. There is some sort of medieval version of it, but I think the version that we get nowadays is
because as you said, there's like lots of different types, and even like the game The Witcher, which is a really good game. There's like the whole sort of storyline of that game is like the wild hunt. I've sort of like travelled to like it's not the Earth realm, is it? But whatever realm that's supposed to be in The Witcher, and it's like they're like coming to like try and find like a certain person, aren't they? And they're like it's like terrifying the local populace. They can sort of like fly through their horses like through the sky and stuff. And they're like, it's a cool.
So what is the story of the wild hunt?
Well, I don't know if there's much of a story.
Yeah,
there,
I
think it's just that because obviously Odin is supposed to have had Sleipnir, is it? This eight-legged deer,
eight-legged horse, I think.
Oh, is it a horse? Is it
eight-legged horse?
It was Loki's, because Loki had sex with the giant's horse, didn't he? And then the giant gave birth.
There's a lot of creatures in Norse mythology that are from like weird things that Loki is.
Yeah. Well, he causes Ragnarok as well, doesn't he? By having sex with, is it Angerboda, the giantess?
And then that gives birth to Jormungandr.
Yeah.
Was it Jormungandr?
Jormungandr and Fenrir as well. Yeah. Snake and Hel. But Hel, and Hel obviously goes to be what would you call it? Queen, I suppose, of like the Hell realm, and then it's her that permits all of the undead to come back in ships made of fingernails and kill all of the gods.
Whoa. So obviously that's obviously like modernised and popularised as Kate Blanchett's depiction in Thor Ragnarok as well. Yeah. She's like Hela in that, but obviously it's like very loose, but you know what I mean. But
then even the sort of versions that we know best, I think it's Snorri Sturluson. It's Snorri Sturluson, isn't it? The Icelandic.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, he was like a kind of Icelandic noble. But he decided to write all of these things down for posterity, I suppose, because at this point in like whenever he was writing the 12th century or something, Iceland had been Christianized for 100 years. People were starting to forget the stories, but being like quite an ardent Christian, he had to contextualize it within Christianity. So he sort of said, well, the Asir, that's just another way of saying Asian. So actually what the Norse gods were, the Germanic gods, they were just Turkish people that travelled to Europe and then convinced everyone that they were gods.
That's crazy.
So he sort of says that at the beginning, but after he sort of prefaced it with like, they're just Asians, then he tells all of these crazy stories about hell and the gods. And
that's so funny. I did not know that about like the Asian thing and like, the Turks and stuff. That's hilarious, man. That's hilarious. Because one of the things I thought would be really cool to talk to you about, I mean, we've already gone into like all of these subjects anyway, but obviously like myself, you've obviously always been really into history, and you've got a history degree, haven't you?
Yeah. So I did a MA in medieval studies.
Yeah.
Which was fun and horrible at the same time.
I can imagine like a lot of work.
Yeah.
So it's funny because we played Stonehenge by Spinal Tap on the way in today, and I remember I said I would ask you what you thought of Stonehenge, but I never actually got around to it. So let's sort of like go back in a circle to that. So obviously there's a lot of like mystery, isn't there, with Stonehenge? Yeah. Because like the stones they think originated from like Wales originally, don't they?
So they know that, I can't remember which way around. I think the big stones came from West Wales. And the smaller stones came from nearby where the henge actually is. To be honest, in terms of like actual factual stuff about Stonehenge, I don't really know anything.
No,
I do know. I do know what Geoffrey of Monmouth, the medieval historian, wrote about Stonehenge. I vaguely remember it, and that is that there was a big war between the Saxons and the Celts. And as a graveyard, Merlin suggested that they erect this henge. So he had a load of warriors go over to Ireland and steal the sacred stones from the Irish and kill a load of people while they're over there, then bring them back to where Stonehenge now is. And I'm pretty sure where they erected it, they were supposed to have erected it over a white and a red dragon who were like forever in battle, and that symbolises the Saxons fighting the Celts.
Yeah. Wait, but how would that end? So he said that's when Stonehenge was built?
Yeah.
But the thing is, don't they think Stonehenge is like 4,000 years old?
Yeah, about 2000 BC, I think. So yeah, pretty much.
But the Saxons didn't come here until about 500 AD, did they?
Yeah, but they didn't know that.
Yeah,
like medieval people, they didn't really have a clue.
They didn't know that, did they? Just making stuff up.
Yeah, because the early modern people had just thought it was Vikings. They were just like, Stonehenge, Vikings, clearly. But then it is only in sort of later, it was once sort of neo-Druidic groups got fascinated by Stonehenge in like the late 18th century that people actually started doing a bit of research, comparing it to other henges and stuff. But obviously now with like modern science, we can pretty accurately date it. But yeah, medieval people, all they had to go off was what some sort of church man said at some point.
I think don't they think that the most accurate idea for it nowadays would have been like a way to like celebrate the solstices and stuff like that?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's why. I mean, obviously, well, we're talking on the solstice today. I think because it does line up. I mean, it wouldn't have been used for that for a long time. I was actually reading quite recently about, I was trying to find out what the Anglo-Saxon idea of the solstice was. Right. Like why we've got this idea of the solstice now. And so the actual word solstice is a Latin word, meaning like the standing still of the sun or something.
It was originally in Saxon, it was called sunstead.
Yeah. Sunasted.
That's the more authentic one. Like I know it's like SUN. ST, is it EAD?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, stead as in stand still in the same way as like a homestead.
Yeah, because I remember like reading this thing. I mean, it seems like almost like silly in a way, but I was reading this whole series of articles about a guy, and he was basically like telling us like all the like our original like names for stuff and how it'd be like cool to like use them again. Yeah, you know what I mean? Because obviously like the Latin influence is very much like obviously the Saxons got very much like. I was going to say like in touch, but that sounds like a really funny way to put it. They had like strong ties to obviously like Rome, didn't they, and stuff. And obviously they were like they would all the priests and stuff would have written in Latin. Yeah, like learn how to read and write Latin, and that's how all of their scriptures would have been. Like if you look at any sort of tale from what was it like 400 or 500 plus years ago, they would all be in Latin, wouldn't they? Yeah, like there were sort of what's the word for it? Like the vulgar languages they'd call it, meaning like the sort of typical ones. Things were written in that, like things like Beowulf and stuff. Do you mean like Germanic languages? Well, vulgar meaning sort of like the regional language as opposed to the sort of overarching, what's it they call it? The lingua franca, the language of the Franks being Latin. Right. So like people would have been able to communicate using Latin, but they would have also had their regional languages. So yeah, like you say, most things, especially anything to do with the church or whatever, or law, it would have been written in Latin, but then you would have got some things that came from sort of folk knowledge or folk memory, and they might have still been written in the local language, so like Beowulf being an example, or something like that, so, which is a shame, because it means we don't have anywhere near as many leftover fragments of Old English as we would had they been comfortable writing in their own language. That is a shame, isn't it? Do you know when Beowulf was written? So I think the copy that we've got came from about 1000, something like that, but it would have been a copy of whatever, which would have originally just been something that would have been like the shop would have told around the fireplace and committed it all to memory. Because it's Anglo-Saxon story, isn't it? Yeah, it's Anglo-Saxon. It's based on, none of it's set in England, it's based on like a Danish king getting terrorised by this monster and then having to resource a prince from what would now be Sweden. So it's all set over there, but obviously the Angles came from what's now Denmark, the Saxons came from what's now Germany, the Jutes came from what's now the Netherlands. So like this is stories, like that's how they know it's ancient, is this is stories that would have been brought over before the 5th century. Right from when they were Danes, I think there might actually be a mention, I might be confusing this with the Nibelung, what's it? The Nibelung Lead or something, but I think there are references to Attila the Hun in it. So are there? It's either Beowulf or the saga of the Nibelungs, whatever you call it, that's the story of like Brunhild and Sigurd, who slays the dragon, Fafnir. But they reckon that a lot of these sort of heroic stories come from the migration period, because that was a time where in the sort of pretty much once the Huns were pushing the Eastern Germanic tribes into Rome, tribes started to migrate all over the place. So that's kind of the same sort of time that the Anglo-Saxons came over here, the Franks went to France. So I guess with all of that sort of, a lot of it's to do with like the collapse of the Roman Empire, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. And with all that sort of like, people would have needed to have been heroic, I suppose. They would have had heroic stories. People like Beowulf or Sigurd. I'm very like almost like surprised in the way that there was like mention instead of Attila the Hun, because that wasn't anywhere near that region really, was it? So
Is it Attila the Hun, or am I getting confused with someone else from that region?
Because Attila the Hun, obviously, I think like he did come around from like what actually is modern day Hungary.
Yeah.
But his empire sort of pushed eastwards.
Yeah.
Didn't it? Rather than like north or west.
So I think it was Attila the Hun, because they call him Atli in the sagas, because obviously they never got anyone's names right.
Yeah.
By the time it was like
Dave.
1,000 years later. Yeah.
What was his name, Dave? Yeah. Dave the Hun. Yeah.
Adam the Hun.
Yeah.
But I think it was the people that the Huns were bothering was the Goths, hence why the Goths ended up moving into Roman territory, sacking Rome, and then that's why we've got this real strange etymology around the word Goth, because obviously if you had to say Goth nowadays, it doesn't mean a Eastern European tribesman.
No.
But the reason that is, roughly, it's quite complicated, but after the fall of Rome, the word Goth was used to mean barbaric, because the Goths were people that stopped civilization, essentially. And at this
Sorry to cut you off, man. Hold that thought. We're going to listen to a track now, but when we come back, we'll get balls.
Sorry, give me time to load it up in my head.
We'll get balls deep into the Goths. Anyway, this is Godless by Dandy Warhols, everyone. Stick around. What was I just saying? Long live Kate Bush.
There's Kate Bush, is that?
Yeah, man.
Oh, right. I've only ever listened to Wuthering Heights. That's the only Kate Bush song I've ever heard.
Yeah, that's like their big. That's like the Enter Sandman of Kate Bush.
Yeah.
I think she's got way better other songs.
Yeah.
Oh no, I say way better. I think it's just you become, you like hear something like over all the time.
Well, that song's never got me hooked.
Yeah, exactly.
Never got me hooked on Bush.
Mate, I'll send you some stuff that hopefully get you hooked on Bush. Because she has got some really good songs, man.
Yeah.
And I would say that whole, I can't remember what it's actually called. That whole album, it might be called Wuthering Heights. That whole album that has like Running Up That Hill and Wuthering Heights on it, it's like a really good album.
Right.
So yeah, I was just playing that album through earlier on when you guys were in the car. But I think the things I really like about that album is the synth and the bass. It's got really good synth and really good bass, and it's very like unique. It's got a lot of character.
Cool.
You know, as I said, there's like no one else really that until Kate Bush came out, there was no one really that ever sounded like Kate Bush before. So I think, like fair shout to the lady. Fair shout to the lady. But anyway, welcome back to Pandora's Box. I'm your host as always. With me in the studio as always we have Mr. Rupert the Bear.
What's up?
Young Bullwinkle.
Yo.
And Bullwinkle's older brother, Mr. Jacob Ayerst.
Wagwan.
How's it going, man?
Yeah, all good.
Jake was just telling us about the Goths before we listened to those last couple of tracks. As I said, Run Up That Hill by Kate Bush. Before that, we had Big Sky Theory by Dozer. So yeah, let's get right back into it, man. I don't know if you remember where you were.
I think I'd only just started, so I'll
talking about how, like, obviously Goths nowadays, you think of like people that like Cradle of Filth.
Yeah. You think of like a moody teenager in their bedroom.
Yeah, in like a black leather trench coat with like white makeup.
God, Mum,
I do not want to go outside today.
Well, going back to Josh, that was Josh when he was like 15. I remember going to the beach with him, and he had painted nails, and he wouldn't go out from under the umbrella wearing like those. Do you remember those necklaces with the metal spikes?
Like a little dog collar or whatever.
Yeah, sat on the beach in Spain.
So funny.
With black Jenkos.
Yeah, man. Oh, I gotta love it. But yeah, the actual Goths.
The actual Goths. So the actual Goths were, they were an Eastern European Germanic tribe, I think, or an Eastern Germanic tribe, however you want to put it.
There were several different ones, weren't there? Because the Goths, weren't they like modern day Sweden, weren't they?
So there was the Geats in Sweden, which I think were related.
Right.
I mean, to be honest, it's definitely not my area of expertise. I only know of it from studying Gothic lit at uni, and this was kind of something we did. We had to breeze over the etymology of the word, but I know that once they divided, which might have happened, I don't know if that happened after the Huns started dispersing them, but they became, is it like Ostrogoths and Visigoths?
I was going to say, because there's the Goths, the Visigoths, and the Ostrogoths. It might have been the Visigoths I'm thinking of, because all I know is I've got this memory in my head of looking at like a map, and it was around from like when Rome was sacked, eventually overthrown, and I think they were talking about how like all the Gothic tribes and stuff, and because what was it? It was the Goths that ended up. It was several different tribes, wasn't it, that banded together? But it was the Goths that overthrew the Roman Empire.
I think like a lot of these things, it was probably sort of a mixture of groups, but the famous ones were the Goths. I'm pretty sure that the Kurgan is supposed to be a Goth.
Yeah, the Kurgan from The Highlander, one of the greatest movies of all time.
Yeah, just for if anyone's struggling to visualise a Goth,
just think of the Kurgan.
Yeah. Were Vandals?
Hey,
from
I'm
that
Sandy.
as well?
Yeah, the Vandals are another group who sacked Rome as well.
Because that blew my mind that when you call someone a Vandal who ruins things and just smashes stuff up, that is literally because of those tribes.
It's a far more like educated diss than you would imagine.
I was like, whoa, I didn't know that that was an actual tribe called the Vandals.
Well, that's what's interesting about the word Goths, is that the word Goths initially, or not initially, but later on, it was used in the same way. So Goths was used after the Enlightenment. As once it got to the Enlightenment in like the 17th century or whatever, 17th to 18th century, they looked back at time as civilization, the sack of Rome, like, well, the Dark Ages essentially, and then the Enlightenment. So they saw themselves, these British educated people in like the 18th century, saw themselves as the sort of the bookend of this dark period, pretty much, and they were the start of civilization again. So the time in the middle, they called it either the Dark Ages or the Gothic Age. Goth just so again they took the name for the tribe and just sort of used it as a derogatory term. And then the word medieval wasn't invented until the 1830s, when some antiquarian called it the medium avum, which is Latin for middle age.
Do you know what? I did not know that, man.
Yeah, so Goth just meant, for a long time, it just meant the barbaric time. But then in the late 18th century, when people started writing Gothic, what's now called Gothic literature, the first Gothic book was The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole, who was the Prime Minister's son at the time.
Really?
And he obviously rebelled against his dad.
Do you know what that book's about?
Yeah, it's about... It's set during the Crusades, and it's a castle in somewhere in Italy, and pretty much it's a castle that's like haunted by the ghosts of knights, and there's a maiden being chased through the dungeons and stuff like that. I mean, it's not the easiest read because it was written like over 300 years ago, and the spelling's not very good, and there's no paragraphs, and it's not easy to get through. But it was the first time that somebody had sort of read medieval romances and gone, I'm going to start writing things like that again. He even pretended that it was something that he found in like a dungeon.
Really?
So when it was first published, it was published as like a found Gothic romance or something.
I like that, how he's almost like a bit like how like the War of the Worlds. Obviously, it was originally broadcast.
Found footage.
Yeah, they were like almost like making out that it was like a real thing, and like loads of people went up in arms about it. Yeah.
It's been like a sort of horror movie / Gothic literature tactic since like its inception, pretty much. That's in like the 1700s. But then people started calling these books that were set in this period, or either set in the medieval period or used medieval motifs like ghosts and knights and headless horsemen, that kind of stuff. They started calling that Gothic literature. Then Gothic literature sort of moved away from that and started being about contemporary ghosts, like the sort of Victorian ghost story you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
But then, so once the term Gothic dropped out of use for sort of horror literature, 100 years later, you get people starting to call themselves Goths because they dress in black and listen to Sushi and the Banshees.
Yeah. I love that example of a band as well, Susie and the Banshees. Yeah. So funny because like nowadays there's almost like a bit more of like a push, isn't there, to like not call the Dark Ages the Dark Ages, because they're basically saying that it's like unfair to call the Dark Ages the Dark Ages.
Yeah, it's unacademic to pass judgment on like a whole time period.
Yeah. So it's more like a period of transition, obviously. Like the Romans say, like from our point of view as like British people, like the Romans pulled out of Britain, and there was obviously like a bit of a power vacuum for a while.
Yeah.
There were no legions to like to defend the sort of the Romano-British population anymore. Eventually, they think that there were like Roman castles along the east coast, weren't there? And they think that like they were already sort of fending off like Saxon sort of like mercenaries and invaders, whatever.
I'm sure, I can't remember what they're supposed to be called, but the name equates to something like Saxon defence or something like that.
Yeah, there's like, you can see there's like Roman castles all around the east coast, aren't there? And then eventually, obviously, because there were no legions there anymore, they sort of took over. I remember hearing like they think that there's like, I don't know what like your thoughts on this, or there's like speculation that people think, because I think the Roman sort of the Viking invasion seems to be so much more notorious than the Saxon invasion, and there's good reason for that, obviously, because I think there's more knowledge about it.
Yeah.
But a lot of people think nowadays that the Saxon sort of invasion, whatever you want to call it, was more brutal than the Viking one.
Yeah, it depends who you ask. There's a lot of so pretty much the traditional narrative on it comes from Gildas, who was, I think, a 6th century Welsh monk, I think. So he was writing about these things about 100 years after they happened, and his take on it, being a Welsh person, or a Briton as they would have called him then, is that Hengist and Horsa, these two Jutish, I think, so from the Netherlands. These two brothers were invited over by Vortigern, the King of Kent, to defend against the Picts, Scots, Irish, all of the other sort of tribes in the British Isles. And then these brothers started inviting over their mates and their family. And then before the sort of local Britons had noticed, there was suddenly like a horde of Anglo-Saxons, and they were like, right, this is our country now. That's like the typical narrative. Whether or not that's actually true, there's not really any direct archaeological evidence to suggest that there was any big battles. There's a famous battle called the Battle of Badon, which is what King Arthur was supposed to have defeated the Anglo-Saxons at, but there's nothing to prove that. Nobody really knows. Nobody knows how many of them came over, like how peaceful the settlement was. I mean, there are little bits of evidence, like you get places called like Woolston in sort of typically Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, and Woolston would mean town of the Wallace, town of the foreigners, which is also Wallace, Wales. Like, so pretty much our word for Welsh still means foreigner.
Well, it's like the same as like England is like land of the Angles, isn't it? Like
Exactly. But what exactly happened, nobody really knows. It's interesting. I went back to Sutton Hoo last week, actually.
I was going to bring up Sutton Hoo because I saw. By the way, that's a hilarious picture of Abby with the it was like Radwold's helmet.
Yeah. I've actually got one of me as well, but it was a child's helmet, so on me it looked ridiculous. I looked like, do you remember the Goombas in the Mario movie?
No, I don't.
Oh, they just, for some reason, they gave them massive suits and tiny heads, but I looked like one of them. But,
that's hilarious, dude.
I
saw a picture of you looking pretty epic, I think, with like a cape on. And
that was in Winchester.
Oh yeah, sorry,
that was cool. Stood under the round table.
Yeah,
actually.
I've been there. Yeah, I didn't get a cape when I went there.
I wasn't supposed to. I don't know if you noticed that the sort of chest piece that I was wearing was about that big.
It looked really hilarious. Yeah. It was like a 4-year-old's.
Yeah. I mean, everywhere I went, I tried the clothes on, but none of it was really made for my 120 kilo frame.
But getting back to Sutton Hoo anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was reading about that sort of, because I knew I was going back and I was real excited about it. I wanted to know a bit more than I did last time, so I sort of looked into, because obviously there's burial mounds dotted all over the place. Like we've got Seven Sisters, like not far from here.
Yeah, and the Quantocks.
Yeah. So that was like one era of burial mounds, and that was kind of pre-Celtic. Like the Bronze Age people would. Inhume, is that the word? Exhume, inhume? They'd bury people, and it'd be some sort of ritual or whatever, some event. And then burial mounds weren't really done in this country. Sutton Hoo is like an example of the comeback of burial mounds, because pretty much you get the Anglo-Saxons come over in the 5th century, but initially, apart from the sort of like mythical war leaders like Cerdic and Hengist and Horsa, people think that they were mostly just sort of farming, like clans of farmers that quite peacefully just, there would have been a lot of space in the countryside. They could have just set up a farm and it wouldn't have been a problem. But then what happened in the mid-500s is first you had a volcano erupt in Iceland, which was so bad it blacked out the sky for like a year.
This.
Yeah, so it caused famine like all over Europe.
And people back then as well, like, they couldn't explain it with science. They probably thought it was like this crazy, almost like supernatural event. Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to know, considering that, the Anglo-Saxons were solidly pagan still at that point, I'd like to know what their explanation was, but being pagan, they couldn't write yet. So
didn't it, like, I don't know your knowledge of it, at first it like went black, but then apparently, from my memory, it almost had this like dark red hue. That just was like that for like a year.
I suppose it would have. I don't really know too much.
But I remember thinking like that would have been like freaky. I'm almost imagining if there was like this like dark red filter on everything, and the sky was almost like this, and the sky was like this really ominous, almost like the colour of like Darth Vader's lightsaber or something.
As you're explaining that, I'm just imagining the end of Mortal Kombat, the movie.
Oh yeah,
is that right? It goes all the sky goes red and everything. Yeah.
Or this is, you three probably won't like know this, but you should watch it anyway because it's amazing. But the old Robin of Sherwood television series from the 80s, which is really good. You, I reckon, in particular, would love it.
I think I know about it. I don't think I've watched it. There's like druids and stuff in it.
Clannad do the soundtrack for it. It's amazing.
Really?
Clannad did a whole album for it, and it's my favourite Clannad album. And it's also like it was the first sort of like depiction of like the pagan. The whole pagan sort of Robin Hood story, whereas traditionally, obviously, they that sort of like left out. So in that series, like Robin Hood. It isn't so much like his name's not so much. It's almost like, imagine like Batman. Yeah. Like, so it's like, it's almost like he is chosen to be Robin Hood by Herne the Hunter, who is like an ancient sort of like
another sort of wild hunt.
Yeah, like a pagan deity from the British Isles. And he's like chosen by Herne the Hunter, who's like the god of the forests and everything. to be Robin Hood, and so he's given like Albion, which is one of the 7 swords of Wayland. And there's, do you know with the story like the 7 swords of Wayland and stuff?
No,
That's
I know who
pretty
Wayland is. I didn't actually know there's any swords about him. I know there's Wayland Smithy in up in Wiltshire.
Yeah, so Wayland is like this like mythological smith, and apparently he made these like 7 magical swords that have like special powers, and each one's got like a different power. So Robin Hood is like given Albion, but there's my favourite episodes of that series, Robin of Sherwood. As I said, if it depends. I know that some people, I think especially like people that are a bit like younger. Obviously, I'm not saying that like I'm ancient, but I mean like, you know, if you're like say yourself, Bullwinkle, and you've grown up in a time where like everything's like, you know, the CGI ever since you've been born has been like pretty decent, really. Do you know what I mean? Like think about like say like the prequel Star Wars movies, like that's. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? That's like around the time you were born. Like that's sort of still decent, but obviously I'm old enough that when I was like a little kid I was watching a lot of stuff from like the 80s and the 70s still and stuff like that, and so I don't mind the fact that they've got like mullets and there's like random synthesizers like funny synthesizers playing, do you know what I mean, and things like that. Like I can like appreciate it for what it is, but there's these amazing episodes called The Hounds of Lucifer, and it's basically the basic plot. I don't want to obviously give spoilers away, but somebody's trying to collect all the 7 swords of Wayland for a purpose, right? And they're quite actually like freaky in their own way, but in that the sky is like red, like how we were describing it, and to me that's almost like the perfect depiction of how I can like imagine when we were talking about what the sky might have looked like back then. That's like how I imagine it the best.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know about. Is that like an old folkloric story then? The 7 swords of Wayland, is that?
I know. I think that was just made for the. No. So the 7 swords of Wayland is, I think. Yeah. But the Hounds of Lucifer story. Yeah, that's just obviously made for the television series. It's
something I've been meaning to check it out for a while because I did a presentation in my masters about the sort of the depiction of Robin Hood as the Green Man, a lot of what I looked into came back to that, pretty much back to that TV show, like Herne the Hunter,
really?
like a wood spirit and stuff like that.
I'm just going to type in 7 Swords of Wayland and see, like, you know, just from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Let's have a look. Oh, and it's just come up with an album by a man called Jerry Marchand, The 7 Swords of Wayland. Nice. Let's have a look. Myths, The 7 Swords of Wayland. It says the 7 Swords of Wayland and their powers are Orias. It just says Ars Paulina. I guess this is supposed to be its power, so I have no idea. I don't know if this is like Latin or something. I don't know. Yeah. And then there's Morax. It just says Ars Gotia. Beleth, Beguilement. Solas, Alchemy. Elidor, Prophecy. Floros, Hexing. And Albion, Scrying. So those are like all the powers that they're supposed to have. And then it says Wayland, or Valand or Voland, is the Teutonic smith god. In some legend, it is believed that Wayland crafted the sword Durandal, the sword of Charlemagne's paladin Roland, and the power of that sword was said to be indestructible.
So there is like some. Well, it sounds quite medieval, doesn't it? Some sort of medieval folklore to it.
Oh, somebody's translated it beneath as well. That what Ars Paulina apparently means the art of summoning demons. So that's pretty dark.
Paulina? Whoa. That's my nan's name.
Yeah, Paulina. She really can. So that's Orias. The sword Orias can make you summon demons. And where's the other translation? And Ars Gotia, the art of conjuring demons. I don't. What's the difference between conjuring and summoning a demon? Surely that's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe summoning's a bit ruder. Like conjuring, you might be a bit more polite about it. Yeah, like, I ask thee, demon, do appear.
Summoning's like demanding.
Summoning's just like you click your fingers.
Yeah. I have, what was it? Yeah, like a thrall or whatever. Like you put somebody like like they're unthralled to you against their will. Sort of thing.
Like Tenacious D, don't they use the pick to summon them or
the pick of destiny. Yeah. Oh yeah, the pick of destiny. Yeah. But no, I was gonna say, like, don't they think one of the things that almost like going back to the sort of theory that the Anglo-Saxons potentially could have been like very violent is we do know, don't we, that like a lot of if not all of like the major Roman settlements were like abandoned.
Yeah, so I don't know, I'm not too sure what the theories are on that. I think that some of it has to do with just the fact that you needed so much infrastructure to run a Roman city. Like they had underfloor heating, they had plumbing. Like,
but surely, like the Romano-British people think by that point they would have grown up from birth, as Romano-Brits, and like the legions were keeping them safe, but the people themselves surely got brought up with the knowledge how to, like, you know.
Yeah, I mean they would have been the artisans and the craftsmen, and And they definitely considered themselves as Romans.
Yes.
Like they were Romans for about 300 years by the time
they lived in Roman houses, in Roman society. They read Latin.
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. I know I've read, I can't remember what the source is, but I've read that the Anglo-Saxons didn't like to go near the Roman settlements.
They thought they were like
they thought they were built by giants.
They thought they were built by giants and almost like places like they were scared of them. So a lot of the towns were like overthrown and stuff like that. And even like the Vikings, when they invaded England, obviously there was still like a lot of like Roman towns and stuff that had just been like abandoned.
Well,
and they thought they were like freaky.
Yeah, people say that London is a Roman town, which it is, I suppose. Londinium was the Roman place, but the reason London is an important place now is because about half a mile down the river, the Anglo-Saxons started trading on the Strand, meaning literally beach, and then that just blew up. It was in such a good position to trade from, and I think there was quite a lot of monasteries nearby, and the monasteries could come and sell wool and stuff like that. So this population just exploded, and that's what London is essentially. It's more of an Anglo-Saxon settlement. It's just that once it expanded, it then subsumed Londinium, which was down the road a bit. But I don't think there was much going on in London of old at that point.
Right. There wasn't like a massive settlement there. Like
But the Anglo-Saxons definitely did get violent, even if they weren't initially, when they were just this possible these little farming communities. Because after that volcano happened, then there would have been what's the word? I'm losing the word now. Famine, yeah, that's the word. Yeah, they couldn't grow anything, and then soon after the famine, or during the famine, there was a bubonic plague spread through Europe, the plague of Justinian, and like you were saying earlier about the Black Death, that would have wiped out a lot of society. And just like when the Black Death happened and it wiped out half of society, that made room for him, for people to climb the social ladder. And the same thing would have happened in 6th century Britain, is that lots of the population were wiped out through famine and disease. So then a load of enterprising Anglo-Saxon farmers would have started extolling tributes from local farms. They would have started getting their mates together and saying, I think we can go over to, I don't know, Hamwich or whatever, and tell those farmers that they're going to give me some of their crops and some of their pork.
Because it's in Hamwich.
For
their pork.
And for that, we'll protect them from ourselves and from other Saxons. So that is essentially where you get the Anglo-Saxon warlord. And then about 40 years after that, 40, 50, 60 years after that, I can't remember exactly what, is when Radwold died and when you get the burial mound. So burial mounds came back because these Anglo-Saxon warlords essentially invented themselves. And by the time, Radwold was Bretwalder, he was king of most of Britain. He was like super powerful.
Oh, was he? I didn't know he was king of most of Britain. I thought he was just sort of king of East Anglia.
Yeah, so he killed Athelfrith, who was the king of, who was the first king to unite Bernicia and Deira into Northumbria. He helped Athelfrith's brother-in-law overthrow him. Yeah,
because I think one thing to tell everyone, because I think most people by this point, they've heard of like Wessex, East Anglia, Mercia, Northumbria, but before there was originally more separate kingdoms, weren't there? Like Dunmonia.
Well, they call it, they call the Anglo-Saxon ones, they call the heptarchy, but that was invented a long time after in the medieval period. I don't think there was ever any such thing as a heptarchy, because when you look at tribal heidages, like the sort of, I can't remember which king it was that this comes from, but it was essentially lists of what all of the other kingdoms owe them as tribute. This would be whoever the Bretwalder was at the time. There's something like 30 to 35 kingdoms. So you've got the 7 well-known ones, Sussex, Kent, Essex, Wessex, Northumbria, Mercia, whatever. But then there would have been like the Wicker and stuff like that nobody remembers anymore because they eventually just got bullied into joining the other ones. So there was definitely a period, like a long period. Until eventually,
obviously, there was just England.
Yeah. And who was that? Athelstan.
Athelstan, that was Alfred's grandson. Alfred's grandson.
That was. I actually saw Egberts. I don't want to say tomb because it's essentially a treasure box with his bones in.
Oh, really?
Did you see that in Winchester? Have you been to Winchester Cathedral?
I have. I didn't know that Egbert's bones were even in there.
So when you're walking down one of the aisles, I had a little map and it was telling me all the things to look at, and it said like treasure boxes or something.
Because Athelstan's buried there, isn't he?
Yeah, I think so. There was 4 boxes, and one of them had what was his name? What was Sweyn Forkbeard's son?
Svein Hawkbeard. He was the guy that was king of, was it Norway, Denmark, and England?
Yeah, he set up an empire. Starts with a U. Married to Queen Emma.
Yeah, What was you know?
Me?
Yeah. Canoe, King Canoe.
Not you.
King Canoe.
Yeah.
But it's because like King
Yeah,
Canoe.
yeah.
You had that in your head, obviously.
I was just thinking a newt.
Yeah. King Canoe. Yeah.
Yeah, so him and Queen Emma were in one box.
Queen Emma of Normandy.
Yeah, Egbert in another one, and then
Old Eggers.
Eadred, Edwin, or I can't remember. But there was a few boxes, but they're essentially up on top of a wall on a box, and you look up there, and then in Latin, in sort of faded script, you can just about see it. I had to get a guy to help me read them because I couldn't really.
I'll tell you what, it
see
is
them.
amazing though. I do remember thinking when I was in Winchester, I didn't realise that Egbert was there. Or at least I don't think I can from my memory. It was about 5 years ago I went.
Yeah.
Maybe I've just forgotten. But I do remember like thinking like it's so cool, innit? Because I think obviously if you're into sort of like that, or even if you're not really into it, but you've watched things like Vikings and stuff like that, do you know what I mean? Like you go there and you're like, oh my god, like I'm literally like right by the bones of this person.
Yeah.
And like the significance of that person, whether it's like because in like modern pop culture that's like on this cool program, or whether it's like the fact that these people actually like shaped like our modern country.
Yeah, like
it's
invented
just cool,
the country.
Man.
Yeah,
it's just cool, dude.
And that's what I said to Abby when we were walking around. I was like, it's strange that all of those sort of scenes that you see reenacted and obviously fictionalised to an extent in Vikings or whatever, all of those Winchester scenes anyway happened within about 20 yards of where we're stood right now.
Yeah, it's like super epic.
Try and listen out for the echoes of it.
Yeah, man, so cool.
I like thinking that when I go up on Borough Mump, just down the road from here, because that was supposed to be, I think someone wrote a biography for King Alfred, and it starts by setting the scene of one of his watchmen who would have stood on Borough Mump looking across the swamp for the Viking ships, who would have known that he was roughly in the area, and they would have come looking for him. So every time I stand up there now, I like just thinking like, yeah, there was a watchman here for King Alfred at some point, and his camp would have been, just down there. And
oh, that's so cool, isn't it?
Yeah,
because I always think that as well when I go across sort of like the levels as well, because didn't he like aren't like the levels like where he was supposed to have like hidden where he like burnt the cakes?
Yeah, so there's a place called Athelney, which means Island of the Prince, or Prince's Island.
Because at the time, it wouldn't have been how it is now. It would have been a lot more swampy.
Yeah. There is a monument to where they think Athelney would have been, but I think that was kind of some Victorians who wanted to put a monument up because they loved it. But it was roughly in that area somewhere. I know that there has been. I think Time Team went there a couple of times.
I don't even know why that was quite funny. That
Time Team.
You do like see stuff like that though, like because obviously like Tintagel.
Yeah.
Obviously, now I'm going obviously onto King Arthur, not Alfred, but wasn't like Tintagel just built by like the Stewarts? Have you ever heard of something like that? Like King James II or King James I?
I'm sure they did a lot of it there. There was definitely trade there from like a long time ago.
Right. I heard something along the lines of that. I can't remember if it was. It might not even be the Stuarts, but I think it was either King James I of England and the 6th of Scotland, or King James II. That he got like fascinated by the King Arthur story or something.
Right.
And then built a lot of what we now know as Tintagel.
Yeah.
And then almost like. It was almost the easiest way to think about it is like imagine like you go to like Disneyland and how there's like a Star Wars thing.
Yeah.
But it's not really Star Wars. Do you know what I mean? But it was almost like the thing that's like the easiest way to like explain it in like modern day. So it was almost like he almost made this an attraction.
Like Disneyfied it.
Yeah, and then but almost like people almost like forgot about that, and then now the average like layman, just like tourist, goes, it's like, oh yeah, apparently this might have been where King Arthur was from.
Yeah.
I've heard something like that. I swear.
No, that's definitely true. I mean, have you been to Tintagel recently?
No, I haven't.
When you go to the actual village, there's this clearly Victorian sort of, it looks like a Masonic hall or something.
Right.
And you go in and it says like, I can't remember what it's called, but it dresses itself up as like where King Arthur and the Round Table would have been and all that. And you go in, and I was chatting to the guy, and it's like a sort of typical tourist shop with like books about King Arthur and stuff, and I started talking to the guy, and he was saying to me like, oh, this is where King Arthur would have married Guinevere, and come and look. And essentially it was a wedding venue. Like he went and showed me into their main hall, and it was real cool. It was made to look all medieval. But he was telling me all of this stuff, thinking that I was a tourist who didn't really know much about it. Little did he know I was studying it at uni at the time. But yeah, it was quite funny.
That's actually so funny, isn't it? It's like, nah, man.
I loved it. I thought, that's actually real cool. He did say that, like, I think once I started talking to him about the actual, because again, to bring him up for the third time, Geoffrey of Monmouth is the source from which we get the fact that King Arthur was born.
Le Mort d'Arthur, he wrote, didn't he?
Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote History of the Kings of Britain.
Oh, who wrote Le Morte d'Arthur?
Le Morte d'Arthur was, I should know his name, but Mallory? I think it was Thomas Mallory.
Oh, Thomas Mallory.
I think so, yeah. It was a couple hundred years later. Pretty much Geoffrey of Monmouth just copied the things that Gildas wrote, but fleshed them out a little bit.
Right.
But his story was that Arthur's dad, I think Uhtred? Or am I thinking of Last Kingdom?
Yeah. And then I was like, Uhtred, son of Uhtred.
I'm going to have to look at that, because I swear it is something like Uhtred.
Well, it might be, yeah.
Hang on, let's have a look. King Arthur's dad.
Barry.
I know his last name was supposed to be Pendragon. That's all I remember, which means head dragon.
Oh,
which sounds like
pretty epic, isn't it?
Yeah, that's like a name. Ufa, yeah, Ufa, not Uhtred. Yeah, Ufa Pendragon. Yeah, so Ufa head dragon.
All right.
But yeah, Ufa was supposed to have fancied the queen at Tintagel.
I fancy you.
Yeah, I fancy you. So he got he went to Merlin. He was like, Merlin, I fancy her.
Yeah.
So Merlin cast a spell on him to make him look like her husband.
Oh,
then kidnapped her husband, and then Ufa. I don't want to use the R word on a radio show. He had non-consensual sex.
Oh.
Yeah. And then
but like she did, but not knowing it was him.
She thought that he was her husband.
So it wasn't consensual in that regard.
Yeah. So then Arthur was born from that. That's what Geoffrey of Monmouth says anyway, and that's really, I don't think much more is said about Tintagel. It gets referenced through like the Arthurian canon, but then, like you say, you get later kings. Like the reason that round table is at Winchester is because I think it was was it Edward the First?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
It
was either Edward the First or Edward the Second.
Yeah, they started modelling. I think it was Edward the First, because he was the first king the first English king to subdue Wales and Scotland and a bit of Ireland. So
Hammer of the Scots.
Yeah. So he saw himself as this new Arthur that could, because in a lot of the medieval stories, Arthur's a bit of a bellend. Like he just goes around. He just goes like in the early ones. Anyway, he just goes around like sacking different countries and making them subservient and stuff. So I think Edward sort of saw himself as like the new Arthur.
Yeah.
So you definitely get that with kings all the way from like the medieval periods, like the Victorians pretty much trying to model themselves on King Arthur. I think they definitely would have done that with Tintagel.
There's even like I know that there's even like a place in Italy, isn't there, that they claim that Arthur's from there because they found like an old sword there in stone. Really? Have you ever heard that? I swear that's a place in Italy. But yeah, like I think we're tempted to think, obviously, as British people, that it's more of just like a British legend. But as I said, all over Europe, he's like he's given a lot of like mythology and glory. Isn't he? Europe. Yeah. It
wouldn't surprise me because that would be a thing. Because one of the theories is that he was a Roman general.
I think that they found like it is a real medieval sword, but it's like a real medieval sword that is like somehow put like half into stone, and they found it in like some like ancient church in like on like some like hill in Italy.
Right. Cool.
And then they just like those people were like, oh yeah, King Arthur's obviously from here.
Yeah. Well, there is one in Taunton actually, isn't there? Have you seen that?
Is there?
Yeah.
That's where he was from, mate. Taunton, just down the road in Taunton. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the earliest reference to Arthur is in a Welsh poem. I say Welsh, it's actually from southern Scotland, but they were Britons at the time, called Egberts, which was about Athelfrith, who I mentioned earlier, who went and conquered the southern, what would now be the southern Scottish, but at the time were British. I can't remember what kingdom. Oh, the Godovin, yeah, that was the kingdom. And in that, it talks about one of the British warlords, and all it says is that he was no Arthur. And that's like the first ever reference to Arthur.
Yeah, sure.
And then you get like a lot of folklore spring up after that.
Yeah.
But nobody really knows. He was probably some warlord at some point. Yeah. That's all we can say.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? It's like we're probably never obviously going to know.
Unless we get real lucky and find... I was about to say if we find a grave, but they did find a potential grave in Glastonbury, didn't they? Have you seen that?
No.
So in Glastonbury Abbey, they found a grave and there was a cross in it. Like I can't remember if it was a metal cross, but inscribed on it in Latin said, "Here lies King Arthur."
No
and
way.
Guinevere.
No way.
Yeah. But I don't know if there was any bones there or not. They might have just dissolved by now. I don't know much about it, but
I know that there's like a myth, isn't there, that apparently King Arthur and all the Knights of the Round Table are buried under Glastonbury Tor. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
There's like a myth, and then supposedly that in like the England's darkest ever hour.
Yeah.
Like King Arthur and like all the knights like Gawain and all that will rise from on their like horses and like defeat whatever like foe is like attacking.
I think I remember as well. I went on a tour around the abbey, and the lady that was doing the tour, that story about the Arthur and Guinevere, she was saying that the nuns and stuff, or the priests that were there, made that story up to get people to come in and like to get money into the church.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, and she did say
there's
about
a lot of that going on everywhere, isn't there? Really? Yeah, it's quite cool.
That was what she said about it, anyway.
Yeah, because I mean, I suppose if he was actually like a northern British warlord, I don't know, that he could have been Christian, but he probably wouldn't have been if it was that early.
Not in those days, I don't think.
Yeah,
really,
because the Romans didn't go north of the wall, did they?
No.
Only on the odd sort of military campaign. So
north of Hadrian's Wall. No.
Yeah. So it would have been unlikely that he would have been Christian. So that he would have had a Christian burial in a medieval monastery in Glastonbury.
Yeah,
probably quite unlikely. But
yeah,
but it could be the case that there was about 10 people that folklore is condensed into one person.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance of that.
Yeah. Because I mean, the earliest sort of actual stories of Arthur are in the Mabinogi, which is the Welsh collection of stories.
Which obviously you know about that, Drew, because obviously you followed the Mabinogi. Yet again, Damh the Bard.
Yeah,
he's got
didn't he?
Yeah, he tells a story. Form. Yeah, he tells a story of the Mabinogi in like an album.
Oh, that's cool. Like an actual bard.
Yeah, literally.
So he's got different branches. There's like first branch of the Mabinogi, second and third and stuff, and he's recorded the stories and then made songs about different parts of those stories. But yeah, I reckon you really enjoy that, man.
I have actually, because I used to listen to him a lot a couple of years ago, and I have actually seen song titles that have got like names from the Mabinogi, like Blodioeth or something like that.
Yeah.
So I assume that I just never listened to him because I always listened to the Cauldron Ball. The mainstream.
Yeah, all the ones that you can headbang to.
Yeah.
It's actually really cool. It's cool to listen to it, and because it's the story, and he does it, but with music put to it as well, and then making songs specifically about those parts of the story to like break it up. Still, it's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. Because I mean, I think all of his music is loosely based at least on the Mabinogi, but that he then released like albums, didn't he? And it's all the different branches, and it's really cool actually, like going through it actually more as almost like an audiobook, but with tracks.
I have to check that out because I've read it. I wrote about that at uni as well, and it's quite a dry, hard, difficult thing to read unless you get like a modern version of it. But when you're reading like what's supposed to be the most direct possible translation, there's a lot of bits like how the actual bards would have just repeated phrases over and over again as like a sort of, is it a mnemonic, like a memory device,
right?
And obviously that's still in the book, so you're reading these repeated phrases over and over again. It's not the funnest thing to read, but you do get real cool bits in it. I mean, the sort of Welsh or British mythology is interesting because for us it's the most local thing. Like they do mention Somerset in it, I think. Like they do leave Wales quite a lot. The actual people tend to say that the name Somerset is Anglo-Saxon, like Somerset, but it was actually a translation of a previous Welsh name for Somerset, which also meant
I've
Welsh.
heard that, and apparently even Bridgwater is.
Oh, really?
Apparently, if you go back far enough, Bridgwater is like some I can't remember what it means now, but it's some translation from some Welsh word.
Right.
Because I think if you look on old enough maps, our area, like Somerset and sort of like following the coast down from Devon, it would have all been like leading into Cornwall, obviously, because Cornish and the Welsh are essentially the same people if you go back far enough, aren't they? They were like, if you like Somerset and Devon would have almost been a part of that, so we would have almost been considered lumped in with the same lot.
All the Celts,
Do you know what I mean? Rather than, obviously, you think later on, obviously, then you think of it more as being like Wessex, but that was later on.
Yeah, well, for a long time, the boundary between Dumnonia and Wessex was the Parrot, which we're literally sat on at the moment.
I'm pretty sure you just rang my bell. I'm pretty sure that Bridgwater has got something to do. Yeah, the name Bridgwater has got something to do with the River Parrot name. But obviously, it's like this name, like it's got nothing really to do with actually like a bridge, which I think obviously you would think now.
Yeah.
I think if you go back far enough, it's like some translation of some Welsh word that has something to do with the River Parrot.
Oh, right.
But I can't remember the details of it. Maybe we could really quickly look it up. We've literally only got like 3 minutes left of the show. Or like 2. But maybe I could really quickly look it up.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure that the parrot comes from what would have been the sort of Brittonic original word as well. But there's a lot of that sort of history around here. I mean, I've heard that they've been out to Steepholm and found like carved Celtic skulls out there because they used to venerate skulls.
They think that the Vikings made like some like some buildings on Steepham and Flatholm, don't they?
I wouldn't be surprised because Holm that sounds Scandinavian.
Well, you think of like Stockholm, Sweden.
Yeah.
It's like Holm is like is more of like a Norse term.
Yeah,
isn't it? Like
I know they did. Swansea's named after a Viking, Swain.
Oh, is it?
So they definitely came into this area. They used to come down the Parrot to sack villages and stuff.
Yeah. And apparently, wasn't there like a Saxon and a Viking battle which took place on what's now Cannington Park?
Yeah, I wish I could remember the name of it. It's in Last Kingdom, actually.
What? The battle's actually at Cannington Park? Well,
they don't know whether it was 100% there, but there was. You've watched Last Kingdom, haven't you?
Yeah, of course.
You know where Uhtred kills? Spoiler alert! Is it Bjorn? No, I can't remember. He kills someone by slashing the back of his heels.
You're on about Ubba.
Ubba, yeah, where he kills Ubba. That was supposed to have been at Cannington.
One of Ragnar's.
So where all the boats were that got burned would have been at Cummage.
Did you know that? I didn't know that.
That's so cool.
So that's the first season, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like the end. I think it's like the last episode of the first season. Because everyone's terrified of Ubba and they think that Uhtred's going to get obliterated, and he is getting his ass kicked. And then he slices Ubba's Achilles heel.
Yeah, which I think is quite similar to what was supposed to have happened. And there was definitely, because there's a sort of Anglo-Saxon that takes the credit for Uhtred, isn't there? And actually he is the person, when you look into it, who's credited with having beat the Battle of Kinwit, that's it. The Battle of Kunwit. Yeah, he's the person that's actually credited with beating the Vikings there.
Oh, what? And that was at Cannington Park?
Yeah, but there are a few places that are credited with it, like all of these things.
Yeah.
In my head, it was definitely at Cannington Park.
It's like they don't actually know where Hastings took place either, do they?
Do they not?
No.
Right.
No, they don't know where the Battle of Hastings took place. I think there's like 3 areas where they think it's like it could have been.
Right.
I think the place that they think is most likely is like on a hill, because obviously like any like military tactician of the time, you would have positioned yourself on a hill.
Yeah.
So they know roughly the area, and they think that it was probably on top of the hill. But apparently, there's like 3 different places where you can see like over the last, sort of like last 1,000 years, people have said it happened.
Yeah.
So it's like if it actually did happen, one of those 3 places, we don't really know. We can only use like educated guesses.
Yeah.
Anyway, man, we've come to the end of the show.
Nice.
Thanks so much for coming in today, Jake.
Yeah,
I feel like
awesome.
we have gone fully balls deep into history today. And I literally pretty much ever since we made the show, I always thought like, oh yeah, I'd really like to get Jake in, because obviously I know that you're probably the only person I know that is probably as much of a history nerd, if not more, than I am. Yeah. So so that's awesome just to like talk about everything, man.
Yeah, that's cool.
Some of the things have gone over people's heads a little bit.
I went over my own head a few times.
But for any like history fans out there, they're going to absolutely love that. So yeah, thanks a lot for coming in, man.
All right, thanks for having me.
And thanks to everyone for listening to Pandora's Box. I have been
Obadiah Pennywhistle.
He has been.
I've been Drupert.
He's been
Bullwinkle.
And you've been
Jacob Ayerst.
And you've been goddamn sexy.